Here's the podcast script. The Shifting Politics of Climate Change, that's the headline from the New York Times, and today we're diving into what new polling tells us about one of the most contested issues in American politics. But first, a quick piece of breaking news: the Trump administration is backing off its plan to dismantle a $368 million ocean monitoring system. The program is critical to understanding climate change and marine ecosystems, and after a bipartisan backlash on Capitol Hill, the administration is abandoning that effort. Worth noting before we get into the bigger picture. Now, the conventional wisdom in political circles has long been that climate change just isn't a winning issue. The thinking goes like this: voters care more about their wallets. People who prioritize the environment are already voting for climate-friendly candidates. And climate skeptics can't be moved by campaign messaging. Many leading Democrats have apparently bought into that logic, shifting their messaging, stepping back from calls to end oil and gas, and downplaying the urgency of the climate threat. But a wave of recent polling is pushing back on that assumption, and the results are more nuanced than you might expect. A Gallup survey from April found that 44% of U.S. adults worry a great deal about global warming. That's among the highest figures since 1989, just shy of the all-time high of 46% recorded in 2020. Add in another 22% who worry a fair amount, and you've got 2/3 of American adults for whom climate change is solidly on the radar. A separate George Mason University survey found similar numbers: about 65% of Americans describe themselves as very or somewhat worried about global warming, and unlike some previous polls, climate ranked in the middle of voters' concerns above issues like crime and health. So why does it feel so politically toxic? The answer is partisanship, and it's stark. According to Gallup, 72% of Democrats say they worry a great deal about climate change, the second highest figure on record. Among Republicans? Just 6%, the lowest ever recorded. That gap tracks closely with the political signals coming from the top. President Trump has called climate change a hoax and rolled back federal support for clean energy and pollution controls. His administration has promoted fossil fuels and derided Democratic climate initiatives as the Green New Scam. A new report from the Potential Energy Coalition and the Rockefeller Foundation, which surveyed 88,000 adults across 6 countries including the U.S., found that the partisan divide on climate in America is wider than anywhere else they studied, and wider than any other issue tested within the U.S. itself. 93% of left-leaning Americans call climate change an urgent problem. On the right, it's 54%, a 39-point gap. Compare that to France, where the issue is essentially nonpartisan: 84% of left-leaning voters and 79% of right-leaning voters there call it urgent. Britain has a 12-point gap. Germany, 19 points. The US gap dwarfs them all. But here's where it gets interesting and potentially actionable. The same report found that the language being used to talk about climate change really matters. Buzzwords like decarbonization, net zero, and climate crisis were shown to be ineffective at building support for clean energy policies. When Americans, including Republicans, were exposed to messages centered on sacrifice, scarcity, or bans, support for climate action dropped. But when the message focused on health, affordability, and reducing pollution, support went up. John Marshall, executive chair at the Potential Energy Coalition, put it plainly: it's not whether you should talk about it, it's how. When we pick messages that feel too ideological, or feel too big, or feel too constraining, or feel too liberal environmentalist, it doesn't move people. But, he said, when you talk to people about climate change and focus on the costs and consequences of pollution, you actually move them a great deal. And that held true even for Republican voters. The article is careful to flag the tension in all of this, though. It's one thing to talk about the benefits of clean energy and frame the conversation around brighter futures. But whether voters embrace the term net zero or not, the underlying science hasn't changed. Stopping the worst effects of climate change will require a massive global effort to phase out fossil fuels. Optimistic framing can help move public opinion, but it doesn't change what actually needs to happen. There was one more story in this piece worth mentioning. The Interior Department announced it would pay the energy developer Invenergy $765 million to abandon plans to build wind farms in the Atlantic and Pacific, the third such deal struck by the Trump administration to cancel offshore wind leases. Invenergy says it will put that money toward at least 5 new natural gas-fired power plants in the Midwest, along with geothermal projects in the western U.S. The politics of climate change may be more fluid than many assume, but the distance between public opinion and policy action remains as wide as ever.